Hello, friends. I'm so glad you're here. Sometimes after a long day, it's nice to slow down and settle into a cozy spot where we can share stories together. This is a special place where bedtime stories help us unwind, spark our imaginations, and gently guide us into sweet dreams. Each night, we'll go on an adventure. Some will be fun, some a little mysterious, but all of them will be told with care, just for you. So grab your favorite blanket, get nice and comfy, and let's enjoy a story together. It's a wonderful way to end the day, isn't it? I'm so happy you're here with me. Tonight's story is from Caroline in South Dakota, and it's called The Whispering Walls of Blackthorn Manor. Nestled deep within the rolling hills of a forgotten countryside stood an old, crumbling estate called Blackthorn Manor. The manor had been abandoned for over a century, left to decay as the vines grew thick around its once grand stone walls. But the townspeople never went near it, not because of its eerie emptiness, but because of the legend that surrounded it. It was said that anyone who spent the night inside Blackthorn Manor would hear whispers from the walls, voices that spoke of unspeakable things, of memories too dark to remember. And yet, those who heard the whispers never seemed to leave quite the same. Some never left at all. But when Lucy and her parents moved to the small town nearby, they didn't know of this legend. They hadn't heard the stories passed down from one generation to the next. They didn't know that Blackthorn Manor had claimed its share of souls. Lucy, being 12 years old and full of curiosity, often wandered the woods that bordered their new home. She loved the smell of the pine trees, the way the leaves crunched beneath her feet, and the mystery of the paths less traveled. It wasn't long before her adventures led her to the manor. She stood at the edge of the overgrown path that led to Blackthorn Manor, staring at it in awe. The manor was massive, with towering windows that seemed to stare back at her like hollow eyes. The door, thick with peeling paint, hung slightly ajar as though beckoning her to step inside. Lucy hesitated. But just as she was about to turn away, something caught her eye, a flash of movement in one of the upstairs windows. She squinted, her heart pounding. It couldn't be. The house was abandoned. Still, her feet began moving before her mind could stop them, curiosity pulling her forward like an invisible string. As she crossed the threshold into the manor, the air grew noticeably colder. Dust hung in the air like a thin veil, and the floorboards creaked beneath her sneakers. Shadows danced in the corners of the grand entry hall, and every noise she made seemed to echo as though the house were alive. "Hello?" she called out softly, her voice trembling. There was no answer, only the wind outside howling through the broken windows. But then she heard it. A soft, barely audible whisper. It seemed to come from the very walls themselves. "Lucy." She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Had she really heard that? Or was it just her imagination playing tricks on her? She looked around, her heart hammering in her chest. The house stood silent and empty. Swallowing hard, Lucy stepped further into the manor. She had to know. She had to see for herself what or who was in the house. The whispers grew louder the deeper she ventured. Though she couldn't make out the words, they were like faint murmurs, coming from all around her, echoing through the walls. Her feet carried her up the grand staircase, each step creaking under her weight. The air felt heavier here, more oppressive. She could feel it pressing against her skin as though something unseen was watching her every move. She reached the top of the stairs and found herself in a long, dimly lit hallway. Doors lined both sides, most of them closed. But one at the far end was slightly ajar, just enough for a thin sliver of light to escape. Lucy's mouth went dry as she walked towards it. The whispers grew louder. As she approached the door, she could hear them clearly now, as though dozens of voices were murmuring behind the walls. Some voices sounded frightened, others pleading, but one voice rose above the rest, a low, rasping voice that made her skin crawl. "Lucy, come inside." Her hand trembled as she pushed the door open, revealing a large, dust-covered room. In the center stood a tall, cracked mirror, and beside it, a small table with an old, worn-out book lying open. But what caught her attention most was the figure standing before the mirror. It was a girl, about her age, with long, tangled hair and a dress that looked like it was from another century. The girl's back was to Lucy, her head bowed slightly as though staring into the mirror. The air in the room felt thick with something dark, something ancient. Lucy opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The girl in the mirror slowly raised her head, and though Lucy couldn't see her face, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over her. The whispers stopped. The girl's reflection in the mirror turned to face Lucy, but the girl herself did not move. Lucy's heart pounded in her chest as the reflection stepped forward, out of the mirror and into the room. It wasn't a girl at all. It was a twisted, shadowy figure, its face contorted into a gruesome smile, eyes hollow and dark as the void. The room seemed to close in around her as the shadow crept closer, its smile growing wider with each step. "Lucy, stay with us forever." Panic surged through her, and Lucy turned to flee, but the door slammed shut behind her with a deafening bang. The whispers began again, louder, more insistent. She ran to the window, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but the glass was unyielding. Trapped, she turned back to face the shadowy figure that now loomed over her, its dark form blotting out the sunlight. Just as the figure reached out to touch her, Lucy screamed. The door burst open behind her, and light flooded the room. Her father stood in the doorway, his face pale with worry. The shadow vanished, and the whispers ceased. Lucy collapsed into her father's arms, trembling and sobbing. Together, they left Blackthorn Manor, the door slamming shut behind them, as if the house itself had sealed them out. They never spoke of what had happened inside those walls, but Lucy knew. The house whispered, and it was still waiting, still listening. It always would be. And no one, not even the bravest of souls, would dare enter Blackthorn Manor again. The end. Well, wasn't that a lovely story? I'm so glad we could share it together. Now, as the day comes to an end, it's time to rest and let all those wonderful thoughts and dreams carry you through the night. Remember, tomorrow is a new day, full of new adventures, and I'll be right here when you're ready for another story. Until then, take a deep breath, get cozy, and know that you are safe, you are loved, and you are important, just the way you are. Good night, and sleep well. If you would like your story read on the channel, please send it in PDF format to stories@doveandserpenttarot.com. Stories must be 2,500 words or less and not previously published.